If you were a kid in the Soviet Union, your life would be pretty straightforward. You would go to a daycare until you were 7, then you would go to a Soviet school where you would spend 10 years, you would spend your vacation at your dacha and enjoy some Soviet ice cream and propaganda while you were growing up to become a decent Soviet citizen. Bonjour mes amis, welcome to Periscape. So today I felt a bit nostalgic, so I decided to share a few moments from how it was growing up in the USSR. Every Soviet kid was brainwashed with Soviet propaganda. Lenin with kids, tales about Lenin, Lenin and a stove mender, our Ilyich, Lenin's school years. Oh, just look at this cute kid with golden locks. And he's so hardworking too. Grandpa Lenin. Grandpa Lenin, like, God forbid. Any story about Lenin was an example of honesty and bravery. Let me give you an example of a story called A Crystal Bottle. It starts with little Volodya Lenin playing in his art's apartment and accidentally breaking a crystal bottle. He's afraid that he would get punished, so he lies that he has nothing to do with the accident, but he actually feels bad about it. So he feels tortured inside for months, and eventually he tells his mom the truth and begs his aunt for forgiveness. Who would have thought that such a nice boy would grow up in some terrible monster who would think that terror is the best way to govern people? One of my favorites is a story about how Lenin quit smoking. Let me read a few sentences to you. When Lenin was 17 years old, he started smoking. He was a student at that time, so it was not surprising that he started smoking. When a small kid of 12 years old smokes, it is terrible indeed. But lots of students smoke. And let them smoke, they are grown-ups. I swear this is not a joke, it's a quote from a Soviet tale for kids. To make a long story short, Lenin was smoking, and it was bad for his health, obviously. So to make him quit, his mom once told him, Volodya, we live off your dad's pension, which is not big. So it would be better for our household if you quit smoking. So Lenin listened to his mom and quit smoking right then and there, and never touched cigarettes again. When I think about it now, it looks like Lenin was a Soviet kid's substitute to Western Superman. He was brave, he was honest, he loved kids. My God, he was our role model. Obviously, in every daycare, in every class, in every Soviet school, there would be a portrait of Vladimir Lenin on the wall, staring down at you. Not creepy at all. Talking about schools, I went to school in 1988. I was 7 years old at the time, and this is when kids go to school in Russia even now. My school was specialized in the English language, meaning that we had English classes 5 days a week and we had to pass an exam to get in. Other than that, it was a typical standard Soviet school. This means that we all had to wear a standard Soviet uniform. A brown dress with a black apron for girls and a blue suit for boys. Boys also had an emblem with an open book and a rising sun on their right arm. I think we all agree that you cannot think of a worse color palette for a girl's outfit. It's just so damn depressing. On special occasion, we had to wear a white apron though, which looked a bit better, I guess. What can I say? I absolutely hated this dress. It was made of wool and was so itchy on my skin, especially in winter when in the morning it was all cold and it was a real torture to put on. My mom tried to heat it on an electric heater to make things easier for me, but still, this was my personal childhood hell. The other thing I hated was this stupid apron, because it had no utility whatsoever. So sometimes I would forget to put it on. And believe me, walking around without the apron at this time was like walking around topless in the center of Paris now. It just felt so uncomfortable. When the USSR collapsed and the stupid uniform was gone, I was the happiest kid ever. There are a lot of things to be said about Soviet schools, and I might need a separate video for this. But let me just tell you about this good old Soviet pencil case. Believe it or not, but all the kids in our class had the same pencil case. It looked like this. It was made of wood, very eco-friendly, as we would say today. But it was so hard, you could literally injure someone with this thing. The only exception was my friend who had a foreign pencil case because she had some family in the West. And it was so beautiful. It had vivid colors and patterns, and I loved it so much that I remember thinking, I hope that communism will come very soon so that my friend shares her pencil case with me. Never happened. There is a common belief that Russian people don't smile much, and my guess is that Soviet toys have something to do with it. Of course, we didn't have Western toys like Barbie and stuff. The best we could get were Czechoslovakian or Polish toys or toys from German Democratic Republic, and believe me, those were not easy to find. The toy industry in the USSR started to develop only in the 60s. The country's economy was devastated during the World War II, so the post-war years were dedicated to the reconstruction, with an emphasis put on heavy industry. Consumer goods, on the contrary, was not a top priority. So the toy industry in the USSR reached its peak in the 80s, and at that time the shelves of the stores were filled with soft toys of all types and sizes. Maybe this explains why I had a ton of soft toys in my childhood. And for some reason, I was obsessed with foxes. I wasn't obsessed with dolls that much, maybe because they looked like this. Actually, I liked to open their heads to look like hair and eye mechanism looked like from inside. I was a weird kid. We also had Soviet construction kits, and if you imagine something like Lego, no, it had nothing to do with Lego. As you can see, it was metal, and you could build all sorts of planes, helicopters, tractors, and such. And I cannot speak about the Soviet toys without mentioning this little hair-raising robot. I was afraid of it. My friends were afraid of it. It looked terrifying, and let's face it, Soviet kids are scarred forever. Okay, I feel like I could go on and on talking about the Soviet toys, and this video would last for hours. Maybe I should make a separate video on the topic. I'll see. I bet that when you were little, you loved watching cartoons. Maybe some Disney or Japanese anime. So did we. However, because of Soviet censorship, we hardly had any access to foreign cartoons, with an exception of Polish or Czechoslovakian ones, because both countries had communist government at the time. I still remember this cute Czechoslovakian mole, which I used to watch as a kid. Other than that, we had to settle for Soviet cartoons, which would vary in quality. While some of them were quite decent, with a nice animation and solid script, others were pretty damn scary. How sick is this shit? And personally, I hated the puppet animation. They looked like fake cartoons to me and a total waste of time. The characters looked and moved weird. They just seemed completely off. And for this reason, even cute Cheburashka didn't win my favor. By the way, did you know that Cheburashka was a huge thing in Japan? Go figure. Of course, most of the cartoons and kids' movies in the USSR talked about friendship, sharing of resources, and other moral guidelines which the state wanted us to acquire to grow up in the decent comrades, I guess. Talking about cartoons, I think it's worth mentioning that we only had 2 channels in the 80s. And the kids' cartoons were not shown every day, except for one show which ran every night and was called Good Night, Little Ones. The opening was pretty awesome, by the way, with some very cool plasticine animation. Check it out. It also had some cute puppies as hosts, and I personally adored this piglet here called Hryusha. And every night they would show a cartoon, after which you were supposed to go to bed. For some reason, my mom believed that this show messed up with my sleep. So before I know it, Rusha left for a summer camp and never came back. And that was the end of the night cartoons for me. And yeah, pretty much believed everything they told me as a kid, which was pretty convenient for my parents. If you have kids, you know that they get little scratches all the time. And parents apply antiseptic on the scratches to avoid infection. What Soviet parents did was covering their kids with this green substance known as zelonka. It looked pretty ghastly, especially when applied on a kid with chickenpox. Basically, zelonka is a diluted solution of triaryl methane dye. God, I hope I pronounce it correctly. It's toxic if ingested, but it's relatively harmless when it gets into contact with skin. Its main feature is its staying power, because it takes days for these green stains to fade, which explains why it has become so popular in attacks on a Russian opposition recently. You have probably heard about it when Alexei Navalny got attacked with zelonka back in 2017. Speaking of groceries, you may know that the Soviet economy was a planned economy. It means that everything was produced according to plan. Nails, underwear, TV sets, cars, toilet paper, everything. The problem with such planned economy was that it was based not on the needs of real people, but rather on the Soviet bureaucrats' idea of what needed to be produced. And this led to a shortage of many goods, including food products. A typical grocery store of the time would generally look like this. It would have bread, 1 or 2 types of pastries, a few dairy products, butter, 1 or 2 varieties of cheese, 1 or 2 varieties of sausage, canned seaweed and canned fish, some non-alcohol beverages and sweets. Everything above was a so-called deficit, that is, rare and sought-after goods, and created long lines. I remember as a kid being in a grocery store filled with jars of pickles. Those were 3-liter jars full of pickled tomato, I guess. And they were also the same 3-liter jars with juice and also some canned food. And the Soviet salespersons used to put them in elaborate pyramids like this to show that shelves were full, I believe. But this doesn't mean that we were starving. We always had something to eat. Mostly rice, potatoes, vegetables, canned fish. This being said, I have to say that rice at the time was full of crap. And before cooking it, I had to sort it like some fucking Cinderella. By the way, when I say crap, it's not a metaphor. It was literally mouse poop. And in case you don't know how mouse droppings look like, they look exactly like rice, except that they're smaller and they're black. Don't thank me for this piece of very useful information. Fun fact, it is still not easy for me to choose products in a typical French mall because I think I'm conditioned to choosing out of 2 types of yogurt, not out of 22. And what about sweets, you may ask? All kids love sweets and we were not an exception. And actually we had some pretty decent candies in the USSR. And by the way, one of the main chocolate factories was based in my native city. So I don't remember liking sweets when I was growing up. I liked most of the candy produced in my city, with an exception maybe of these sweets, which I found pretty disgusting. But after all, it was not chocolate. They were made of condensed milk, sugar and butter. And I always hated condensed milk for some reason. Apart from candy, we had ice cream, although I don't remember having a lot of varieties in my city. Apparently, people who lived in Moscow were more lucky in this respect. The most common ice cream was this one called stakanchik because of how it looked like. It basically had one milkish taste. It was made of condensed milk and sugar, although I think that in late 80s you could sometimes see a chocolate one. I also remember the ice cream in this brick-shaped package, which also had some basic milk taste, pretty much the same as the glass-shaped one. As for the sweet drinks, we obviously didn't have Coca-Cola and such, but we had our Soviet lemonade. Apparently, there were quite a few varieties, and they all looked the same, sold in these glass half-liter bottles. But the most popular one was the one called Buratino, and this is also the one I clearly remember. It tasted like lemons and apples. It was actually quite good, and I believe that you can still find it in some places in Russia. Fun fact, the Pepsi factory opened in the USSR in 1974. But what is funny is that I have never seen it in my city. And for the first time, I tasted Pepsi in the 90s after the USSR collapsed. The real treasure for a Soviet kid was chewing gum. Believe it or not, but actually the USSR produced its own chewing gum. It looked like a typical 5 sticks chewing gum and had 5 tastes: orange, strawberry, raspberry, mint, and coffee. Apparently, the coffee one was pretty disgusting, which I tend to believe, but it was efficient for hiding the alcohol breath, which made it popular with certain adult men. Soviet chewing gum was more dense than the foreign one, which made it practically impossible to blow bubbles out of it. And the first foreign gum to appear on the Soviet market was the Turkish Turbo. It cost 1 ruble, a huge amount of money at the time, and you could only find it on a black market, I believe. It had wrappers inside with photos of foreign cars and motorbikes, and you can imagine that Soviet boys just loved it. Another foreign chewing gum that appeared on the black market in the USSR was Donald Duck. It was a Dutch chewing gum, and again it cost 1 ruble, which a modest family like mine just could not afford. No bubble gums for me. This being said, if you did get lucky and got a chewing gum as a present, for example, you would chew it for days. At night, you would put it in a freezer or in a glass of water, and you would take it out in the morning and continue to chew it. What's worse is that kids would sometimes share it and chew it in turns. I know it sounds awful, but I also find it cute that kids would share such a treasure between themselves. And that's it for today, my friends. If you learned something new today, hit the like button and subscribe for more. See you soon. Au revoir.